Snowpack numbers are in 2 years in a row. We're going to end above average. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods taking a look and breaking down where we start to head into less in the way of snowfall and more into the way of snow melt for California. Here's a look at the comparison. So yes, we ended this year above average for that April 1st date. That's kind of that line of demarcation, like I said, where we get less in the way of snowfall coming in and more of the way of snow melt filling our reservoirs. We were down from last year's average of 262%, but these are two back-to-back years, which is rather rare in California to have that above average snowpack. You can see the statewide snow water equivalent average, if we were to take that snowpack and melt it all down, was pretty impressive. Last year we had 63.2 inches of snow water equivalent. This year 29 inches, so the difference about 34 inches nonetheless. When we have two back-to-back years like this is really great news for California. Looking at the Sierra, now we've got three distinct sections that we break it down into: the northern, central, and southern Sierra. Last year was a record-setting year for the central and southern Sierra, which made huge impacts for many of those reservoirs. Not so much for the northern part of the Sierra Nevada, but all in all, everybody really banked on some huge numbers last year. That is shown there in the yellow bar. So you can see in the central Sierra how that was above what was our historic high number back in 1982-83. Didn't quite beat that for the northern Sierra, but nonetheless, like I said, huge numbers last year. The blue line is where we were this year, a little bit below well below, I should say, where we were last year, but a little bit above that average. Nice to see. All in all, we have water for the dry season. A little closer perspective, you can see how those numbers match up here. Last year, as well as this year in the blue, and then our historic line in the green, 1982-83. So building the savings account. Last year, this is how things look like for our snow water equivalent, the contours across the Sierra Nevada. We started off the year January 1st. It's not necessarily the water year. That actually starts off October 1st. But the beginning of the calendar year, January 1st, it was a very thin snowpack. Things really weren't looking too good. And being that it was a big El Nino year, it looked like maybe this just wasn't going to be statistically one of those big El Nino years that delivered big snowpack. Then we had hit February and March, and those numbers continued to climb, bringing us to roughly today, where we have a nice snow water equivalent. The contours nicely spread out throughout the entire Sierra, so it's not like one part of the state really benefited and another didn't. It was pretty much uniform. We'll take a look at the precipitation numbers as well. Here's a look at the numbers, though, from this year's water snow surveys. Again, when we started off the year, we were only at about 30% of average for the state. And then we jumped up to about 50% of average for that second snow survey. By the third one, we were kind of closing the gap at about 80% of average throughout the state. And then as we headed into that miracle March, we got up to over 100% of average throughout the state. We may even get that fifth snow survey this year in May because we've got more rain and snow in store later this week. Okay, breaking down why snow surveys matter. We're one of the only states that really does this kind of measurement. We put this big tube into the snowpack. We not only look at how deep the snowpack is, but how much water is in that snowpack, because it really matters what type of snow is in the ground. If it's white and fluffy and crunchy and just doesn't have a whole lot of moisture to it, really doesn't matter what the depth is. It matters how much water is in that. So that is why we measure it. It also is a key indicator to the state's water supply forecast for that April 1st date. Again, because it's considered the peak season for our snowpack. Once we hit after April 1st, we'll start to see that ratio of snowfall to snow melt shift more towards the snow melting side of the equation. Our Sierra snow water equivalent, just looking at those sheer numbers, 124% of average for the northern Sierra, central Sierra, 107%, and then for the southern Sierra, 100%. Like I said, really uniform numbers this year, which was nice to see, especially because we have those big reservoirs in the northern part of the state, but we also have reservoirs in the central and southern part of the state. And if those don't see some pretty good movement up for filling those, we have to draw more so from the northern part of the state, which tends to do a little bit better for our snowpack numbers. Not always the case, but usually. So our snow survey impacts, the snow actually supplies a third of the state water needs. It helps fill our statewide reservoirs, and then we can kind of supplement if we don't get too much in the way of snowpack, oftentimes called our savings account for water. We can supplement that with surface water, groundwater, and also importing that water. Unfortunately, when we import, that is at a cost to the consumer. So we want to try to keep the natural occurring snowpack coming in. As far as our atmospheric rivers, actually, this should say 22-23. Needed to change that up there because this is where we are for the water year 2024. The Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes showing how many atmospheric rivers came through. Most of them were through the Pacific Northwest, which was kind of a flip-flop for what we traditionally see in those big El Nino years. All in all, though, anything that did come through was in that strong and even that moderate category, helping to drive those numbers up. As we take a look around parts of the state here, Immigrant Gap, which is along I-80, kind of running right through central California into the Tahoe Basin. We can see the snow is still on the ground there. Mount Shasta off in the distance. Oh, you can see the snow-capped mountains. That actually helps fill our biggest reservoir in the state. We'll take a look at those numbers in a second here, too. Mammoth Mountain, we're going to see big snowfall coming in this weekend. That was one of the big winners last year. Still snow on the ground there. And then Lake Oroville, which is a recipient of that snow melt, is looking really healthy and full as well. Right now, we're at 88% capacity for Lake Oroville, 124% of average. There it is. It's along the Feather River, which runs out of the Sierra Nevada. Again, the snow melt meters slowly into the Feather River and helps to fill Lake Oroville, which feeds much of the water supply throughout the state. Shasta, that's our biggest reservoir in the state. It is 117% of average, 93% capacity. Trinity, one of the harder hit reservoirs actually last year. Surprisingly, even though we had this huge water year last year, Trinity was running really low. It was just a small section of the state that didn't benefit from some of those big atmospheric rivers that came through last year. And Folsom, it's a smaller water supply. It's along the American River, runs right out of the Tahoe Basin. It's 115% of average, 73% capacity. It feeds a big metropolitan water supply for the Sacramento region. Traveling our way southward here, New Melones is at 135% of average, 84% full. Don Pedro, pretty much equal of that, just a little bit less in the way of averages at 111% of average. Millerton, 115% of average, 80% full. Now, San Luis is one of those different types of reservoir that we have in the state. It is actually off-streamed. It's through pumped water, and it gives Department of Water Resources as well as the Bureau of Reclamation a little more flexibility in how they can manage San Luis Reservoir. Because it's not directly snowmelt fed, they have a little bit more flexibility in either bringing the water levels up or down. That one can get pretty low. If you ever go through the Pacheco Pass, you can really see what we call that bathtub line and years of drought where it's pretty evident that we have the low water. Shasta continuing to fill. I mentioned this is our biggest reservoir in the state. The averages are going to be represented in this teal shaded region right here, and we're once again above average. So we're approaching near capacity. It's nice to see that getting full. It's huge, not only for water supply, but recreation as well. And that's nice to see as we're starting to head into the drier part of the year. The other big storyline that we're tracking, Lake Berryessa, close to full. Now, it actually spills into what is called the glory hole. It's a natural just overflow area. You can see it right here in Lake Berryessa. It actually starts to spill when that lake gets to 440 feet. Right now it's at 439.89 feet, so roughly about 439.9 9 feet, a little bit below natural spillage. But we got this video in, and you can see, due to just wind knocking the waves around, as well as any kind of recreation and boat action, it is starting to flow over the glory hole there at Lake Berryessa. So some exciting news every time those pictures come in. In California, we do what we call building a water year. And this is what makes it challenging, but also really fun to watch, how water managers are either releasing water from those reservoirs or holding it back, looking at those big atmospheric rivers that might be pulling their way through the Pacific and having to do those releases so it gives capacity for those reservoirs. The fall rain starts typically in October and November. Now, December, January, and February account for 50% of our annual precipitation in the state. I'll repeat that. It's 50% of the entire water we get for the entire year comes in 3 months. That's not to say we can't get some snow and rain in March and April. We had that miracle March come through this year, bumping up that snowpack. But April 1st, there's that peak snowpack, because at that point, we start to see more in the way of snow melt. This is the time that we start to see those reservoirs fill. We just don't get those big atmospheric rivers, which can be dangerous. And we go kind of scaling back from flood control in the reservoirs to more water supply as we head into our peak demand for water. But it is also the peak time for dry weather and also heat. That can lead to evaporation. And so again, it's always this push and pull to keep that water in the reservoirs when the water is at its highest demand, and still provide water to almost 40 million people that live in California. And then we'll reset again for October 1st for the next water year. Lake Tahoe, just kind of looking at those average snowfalls, and you can see March still can be a big month for us. So rainfall generally is that 3-month window. Snowfall can linger a little bit longer, but in April, it just absolutely drops off. And then May, basically, we get nothing all the way through the dry months. Our normal rainfall will follow this path as well. There's those 3 months that I talked about, December, January, and February. That's just taking one location, downtown Sacramento, but it pretty much falls in line with most locations throughout California, except the areas that are more prone to some of that monsoonal activity in the desert Southwest that spills over into Southern California. But generally speaking, for areas in the northern part of the state, this is when we're going to see most of that rainfall, and it really just tapers off. By the time we get to May and June, we see about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of rain, and then July, August, and even into September, virtually nothing comes our way. So we're at that point in the year where we've seen the bulk of rain come through, and the numbers are impressive. Statewide, we had those huge storms come through Southern California. Even Easter Sunday, we still had rain coming through in Southern California. Given that, though, we're below average for Sacramento by about 1 inch. Palm Springs is below average. That pretty much is almost every year, I feel like we say. South Lake Tahoe, a little bit below average for total precipitation. That's going to account for not only snowpack, but also for rainfall for the year. Given that the snow water equivalent is at 100% of average, that number really is somewhat innocuous because we have the snowfall. And the snowpack, as I mentioned, is our savings account. It melts down slowly, fills the reservoirs, and when we don't have enough water in the reservoirs, we have to resort to, groundwater, which is stored underground. The good news is that back in 2012, 2016, we had this horrible drought. And then on the heels of that, we came up with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was enacted by Governor Brown. And he said, well, we have to do something about our groundwater. We can't just keep pumping this. It's really doing huge damage to that supply of water, which is way more than anything reservoirs can supply. Reservoirs in total, 43 million acre feet of water. We have about 1 billion acre feet of potential storage underground, and that's why it's so critical. In big water years like this, what we're going to be able to do now that the airborne Observatory, we had this electromagnetic survey go on throughout the state, and they discovered what was underneath the ground: sands and gravels, or silts and clays. And that's really going to help the Department of Water Resources understand how we can get that water underground. Is it going to be more difficult trying to go through less porous material, or is it really porous material where we can take maybe some of this extra water we're going to have this year and store that underground? It's used by communities and farmers when there's not enough surface water. They're able to pull that from underground. Now, if you're one of those people saying, all right, I'm done with the rain, I'm done with the snow, we are going to be leaning into a warmer forecast for the middle of the month, as well as likely drier. But I am seeing some indications by about the 18th of April, we could potentially be right back at it into more rain, snow, and cooler weather. In the meantime, like I said, we've got that weather system that is going to be moving our way, headed into our Wednesday late evening. Most of that rain and snow starting to pick up. That's going to take us through our Thursday and Friday. In fact, Friday morning could see that snow line down to about 2,000 feet. So we're not quite done yet with all the rain and snow. By the way, we got a great water series going on right now. Not only do we have a couple of those water series that live on our ABC 10 Plus streaming channel, but the most current one, The Future of California's Water, is in the middle of debuting on air on ABC 10 every night at 6:30 p.m. on To the Point with Alex Bell. I invite you to go ahead and watch that, and we'll be posting those pieces on ABC 10 Plus as well as our website. So check it out, kind of looking at how we're managing the water and how some of the planning or lack of planning has affected our water supply throughout the state. In the meantime, have a great day.